Cambridge professor, Professor Emeritus in Primate Biology and Conservation, former president of the Primate Society of Great Britain, held up a plaster cast taken from a muddy clearing in the Sumatran jungle. He looked at the camera and said one line: "This is Bigfoot's cousin."
That cast was made from a footprint left by something 3 feet tall, something with a divergent big toe, a heel built for upright walking, and a hand structure that doesn't match any known animal on Earth. Locals call it Orang Pendek. The Indonesian phrase translates literally as short person. It doesn't attack people, it watches them. And in 1989, a British journalist went to Sumatra to write a magazine article about local folklore. 4 months later, she saw it herself. 3 weeks after that, she saw it again. Over 15 years, she saw it multiple times, close enough to describe the way it moved. In 2017, on the same island, mainstream peer-reviewed science admitted they had missed an entire species of great ape. In 2024, a team of researchers set up cameras to find Orang Pendek and accidentally photographed a Sumatran tiger that wasn't supposed to exist there anymore. And in March of this year, the Cambridge professor who analyzed those casts died just 6 months after the Idaho State anthropologist who'd worked the same evidence with him. The 2 scientists most willing to take this question seriously are both gone now. The question they left behind is still open, and I think it's the most credible cryptid case in the world. If that sounds like a strong claim, give me the next 40 minutes. I'm going to walk you through 103 years of sighting reports, a Cambridge plaster cast analysis, a 2017 announcement that should have rewritten how we talk about Sumatra, and the single strongest piece of skeptical evidence. And at the end of it, you can decide for yourself.
Of every cryptid I've covered on this channel, this is the one that gives me the least skeptical resistance. By the end of this video, you will see why, and I think you will be a little annoyed at how few people have told you any of this.
You have to start with how the people of Sumatra describe this thing, because their description is the part that doesn't change. Across centuries, across villages, across languages within the same island. The details stay locked. The locals don't fear Orang Pendek because they've been attacked. They fear it because it watches them. In over 100 years of recorded sighting reports and more than 30 years of focused field research, there is not a single confirmed Orang Pendek attack on a human. What there is, instead, is the feeling of being observed by something that does not want to be seen. Plantation workers described turning around to find a clearing where nothing was when they walked into it. Hunters described their dogs going silent for no reason. The physical profile, repeated by witness after witness without coordination, is specific. 3 to 5 feet tall. Bipedal, broad-shouldered. What multiple researchers describe as a barrel chest, a torso disproportionately powerful for the height of the creature, short, muscular legs, long arms with a thumb that some accounts describe as almost vestigial. Hair color varies, honey brown, black, sometimes gray, but never the orange-red of the Sumatran orangutan. The behavior is what makes the description hard to dismiss. Witnesses report it rolling rotting logs to forage, uprooting small trees, breaking rattan vines with its bare hands. It eats ginger roots and durian. The signs it leaves behind are everywhere in Kerinci Seblat National Park. Footprints with a human-like big toe, bedding sites in dense undergrowth, chewed plants, broken branches arranged in patterns. Everything except the creature itself, and the name they gave it tells you what they think it is. Orang Pendek, short person, same linguistic root as orangutan, person of the forest. In every Indonesian dialect, this word is precise. The locals are not telling you about an animal. They are telling you about someone. If you talk to villagers around Mount Carinzi, and field researchers have for decades in their own languages, without any of the leading questions a foreign journalist might bring, the most consistent detail is not physical. It's how they describe the encounter. They don't say they saw it. They say it let them see it. They describe a sense of being watched first, sometimes for minutes, sometimes longer, before the creature finally allowed itself to be glimpsed. Then it was gone. And no one in any of these villages has ever recovered a body, never killed one in self-defense, never trapped one in a snare. It does not get caught. That, more than the height or the hair color or the footprint dimensions, is the part of the description that should bother you. For 100 years, the West dismissed those accounts as folklore. Then the Dutch started seeing it themselves. The first written Western accounts of Orang Pendek date to the late 1800s. Dutch colonists arrived in Sumatra to establish plantations and survey the interior, and they came home with stories the locals had been telling for centuries. Except now those stories came from European hunters and naturalists, not Indonesian villagers. The most cited historical encounter happened in 1923. A Dutch colonist named J. van Herwaarden was hunting in the South Sumatran forest. He was a trained observer. He had a rifle. He spotted a dark-haired creature on a tree branch a short distance away. And then he did something that surprises every modern reader. He didn't shoot. He watched it for several minutes. When he wrote up the encounter in a 1924 article for the Dutch periodical De Tropische Natuur, his own words were the most telling part. He described the creature's face as having nothing repulsive or ugly about it, nor was it at all ape-like. He noted very dark hair falling to just below the shoulder blades. He estimated that if the creature had been standing upright, its arms would have reached to a little above its knees. And then he made the decision, for reasons he never fully explained, to lower his rifle and walk away. A trained Dutch hunter, armed, with the creature unaware of him, choosing observation over a trophy. Why? Because the thing he was looking at didn't look enough like an animal. He couldn't bring himself to fire. That same year, the Semarang-based newspaper De Lokomotief published an article titled De Orang Pendek op Sumatra, compiling eyewitness testimonies from across the southern Sumatran estates. The framing in that article was striking for its time, colonial administrators openly debating whether this was folklore or a relict hominid population. Through the 1910s, 20s, and 30s, Dutch hunters, planters, and missionaries kept producing the same accounts. Footprints 15 to 20 centimeters long, human-like big toe, always the same body type, always the same behavior, shy, observant, refusing to be seen. Either trained European observers across decades with no shared cultural script were experiencing the world's most coordinated misidentification of bears and orangutans, or they were seeing what the locals had always said was there. I'll let you decide which is more likely. Then in 1989, a British journalist arrived who didn't believe any of it. Debbie Martyr was not a cryptozoologist. She was not even a scientist. She was a journalist for British outlets, and she came to Sumatra in 1989 on a travel writing assignment. The folklore around Orang Pendek was supposed to be local color for her article, a paragraph or two of "Look at the quaint legends these jungle villagers tell." But the villagers she interviewed weren't telling her legends. They were describing encounters, with specific details that lined up between witnesses who had never met each other. Plantation workers, tiger trackers, a man who had seen the creature foraging near his rice paddy. Their accounts contained the same body type, the same gait, the same eye color, the same height, across people who lived in different valleys and had no reason to coordinate a story for a foreign journalist. Her skepticism began to crack. She extended her stay. She moved up into the mountains near Mount Carinzi. And in September 1989, 4 months after she had arrived in Sumatra for what was supposed to be a quick assignment, she saw it herself. Her own words given in interviews years later. I had a camera in my hand, but I froze because I didn't know what I was seeing. Think about that for a second. A trained journalist holding the piece of photographic evidence the entire world has been waiting for. And her body refused to take the picture. 3 weeks later, she saw the creature again. Over the next 15 years, she saw it multiple times, close enough to describe how it moved, what she called grace and efficiency, unlike any known primate. What happened after those sightings is what gives Martyr her credibility. She didn't write a sensational book. She didn't go on the talk show circuit. She stayed. She became head of the tiger conservation team for Kerinci Seblat National Park, the largest protected area on Sumatra. That is not a job you get if serious people think you're chasing ghosts. She spent the next 15 years systematically documenting Orang Pendek eyewitness reports from rangers, villagers, and trekkers. She worked alongside British wildlife photographer Jeremy Holden, who became her main field collaborator. The two of them collected the footprint casts that would eventually end up on a desk at Cambridge. And the day-to-day work she described in interviews was not glamorous. 6-hour treks into the wettest jungle in Southeast Asia. Months spent setting and retrieving hair traps, cataloging prints that had been partially washed out by rain before she could reach them. Sleeping in field stations where the temperature didn't drop below 70 at night and the leeches found you no matter what. She was, by her own description, not running a cryptozoological pursuit. She was running a wildlife survey with Orang Pendek as one item on a list that also included tigers, sun bears, clouded leopards, and several primate species. She just happened to be the only person on the list who would say, in print, that she had seen the cryptid item with her own eyes, multiple times. Other field researchers came in over the following decades. Richard Freeman, zoological director of the Center for Fortean Zoology, led multiple Sumatra expeditions starting in 2003. I want to be clear about Freeman. He's a cryptozoologist, not a credentialed academic biologist, and this channel doesn't pretend otherwise. But his fieldwork has been serious. The Center for Fortean Zoology's 2022 Sumatra expedition captured a Sumatran tiger on a trail camera outside the species' known range. The same camera methodology being used to look for Orang Pendek is, in fact, catching large mammals that mainstream science had missed. Hold on to that fact because it's going to matter in a few minutes. And then there's Adam Davies, a British explorer who collected the single piece of physical evidence that finally got the attention of someone with a Cambridge title. This is where the title earns itself, and I want to walk this section carefully because it's where most cryptid videos start lying. Dr. David Chivers was the Professor Emeritus in Primate Biology and Conservation at the University of Cambridge. He was a former director of studies in veterinary medicine at Selwyn College. He was a former president of the Primate Society of Great Britain. He spent decades studying gibbons and orangutans across Southeast Asia, real field work, real publications, real students. He is, by any honest measure, exactly the kind of credentialed primate biologist that a story like this needs. Chivers analyzed the plaster casts Adam Davies brought back from Sumatra. His conclusion was specific and careful. The footprints showed features blended from chimpanzees, humans, gibbons, and orangutans, but were distinct from all four. He categorized the maker of the print as a large, unknown primate. His direct quote, on camera, looking at the cast, "It definitely walks erect." Years later, after the 2024 Marshall expedition brought back more tracks, Chivers made what would turn out to be one of his last public statements on the question. "I'm still sure it's there," he said, "but I'm bothered that we can't pin it down." 6 months later, in March 2026, David Chivers died. He was 81. The other credentialed scientist who took this question seriously was Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know that name. Full professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University. PhD in anatomical sciences. The leading academic authority in the United States willing to attach his career to Sasquatch research. Meldrum looked at Davy's Sumatran casts too. He confirmed it was a primate print, but he raised a careful, sympathetic, skeptic caveat. He suggested it might be a handprint, not a footprint. The same ambiguity Chivers would echo later. I want to land that for a second. The two most credentialed scientists willing to engage this evidence didn't agree on whether the cast showed a hand or a foot. That kind of in-public scientific disagreement is exactly what credibility looks like. Cranks don't argue with each other. Honest researchers do. And the disagreement itself, when you look at it carefully, is more interesting than either resolution. If the cast shows a foot, you have an upright walking small ape with a divergent big toe, something morphologically novel, something the field of primatology would have to make room for. If the cast shows a hand, you have a great ape using its hands to support its weight on the forest floor in a way no known Sumatran primate does. Either reading lands you on the same conclusion. Whatever this is, mainstream science has not classified it. Chivers and Meldrum disagreed on the body part. They did not disagree that the print came from an animal that does not appear in any current zoological textbook. Jeffrey Meldrum died in September 2025, age 67, of brain cancer. David Chivers died 6 months later in March 2026. The two scientists most willing to put their names on this question both gone within half a year of each other.
Two of the most credentialed scientists willing to entertain this question are now gone, within 6 months of each other. That is a generational loss for serious investigation of this evidence, and I want to mark it before we go any further.
The third credentialed name in this story is Carl Marshall, a UK biologist who led the most recent serious expedition to look for Orang Pendek. And what his team found was not what they were expecting. In October 2024, a UK research team flew to the Parayangan region on the west side of Sumatra. The expedition was led by Carl Marshall, a biologist with prior field credentials including verified leopard DNA work in England and tracking of suspected Eurasian lynx populations in the Forest of Dean. He was joined by filmmaker Andrew Jackson, Center for Fortean Zoology researcher Richard Freeman, and local guide and researcher Dali Sendradiputra. The Parayangan forest was not a randomly chosen location. It was the kind of jungle patch that mainstream conservation science had effectively written off, cut off from the larger Sumatran forests by decades of deforestation and urban sprawl. The official position on Sumatran tiger presence in that area was clear: functionally extinct. No confirmed sightings for years. The forest was small enough, isolated enough, and surrounded enough by human development that a big cat surviving there had been ruled out. The team deployed motion-activated night vision trail cameras throughout the area. They were looking for Orang Pendek. While they were waiting on cameras, they did the boots-on-the-ground work, surveying the forest floor for tracks, listening for vocalizations, collecting samples. At one point, they found unusual prints in soft ground that matched no known regional animal. They plaster cast the tracks and shipped them to Cambridge for Chivers to analyze. His verdict on that cast became one of the last major statements he made on the question. The print resembled, in his words, a great ape's hand, not a foot. He could see fingers and a thumb. He ruled out bear, monkey, and any known regional ape. The same hand or foot ambiguity Meldrum had raised years earlier was alive again. A great ape somewhere had left a print in the Sumatran mud. Mainstream science could not put a name on the animal, but it was the trail cameras that delivered the bonus discovery. One of the cameras, set up to catch Orang Pendek, captured photographs and video of a Sumatran tiger in a forest patch where the species was officially considered functionally extinct. Marshall's own statement on the find: against all odds, either the Sumatran tiger has persisted unknown in that area the whole time, or somehow they have crossed the deforested areas and urban sprawl to reoccupy this forest enclave without being seen. I want you to sit with what that means. They set up cameras designed to find a cryptid. The cameras worked. They caught a large predatory mammal that mainstream conservation science had ruled out of that area entirely. The methodology is not the problem. The problem is just that the specific target, the Orang Pendek, is harder to catch than a tiger. Think about what that implies. A Sumatran tiger weighs 300 pounds and operates over a territory measured in dozens of square kilometers. It is one of the largest predators in Asia, and in a forest patch that conservation biologists had effectively given up on, a couple of weeks of camera deployment caught it on film. If something is more elusive than that, quieter, smaller, smarter about where the cameras are placed, it doesn't have to be supernatural. It just has to be paying attention. And every villager and every researcher who has ever described Orang Pendek has used some version of the same word for what it does. It watches. Cliff Barackman on the discovery. New species of animals are being discovered all the time, and even large animals as well. To say that all the discoveries have been made is a statement born of hubris. I don't quote Barackman lightly, but he's right on this one. And then in 2017, mainstream peer-reviewed science admitted something they should have admitted decades ago. This is the single strongest scientific argument for taking Orang Pendek seriously, and I want you to feel the weight of it before we move on. On November 2nd, 2017, the journal Current Biology published a peer-reviewed paper. The authors were an international team of Indonesian and global scientists. The conclusion of that paper rewrote the great ape family tree. There is, the paper announced, a third species of orangutan, Pongo tapanuliensis, the Tapanuli orangutan. It lives in the Batang Toru forest of North Sumatra. Its population is fewer than 800 individuals. Genetically, it is more closely related to the Bornean orangutan than to the Sumatran orangutan living further north on the same island, and it diverged from the common ancestor of both approximately 3.4 million years ago. That's the oldest evolutionary history of any orangutan species, older than the split between humans and Neanderthals, by a lot. I want you to fully absorb what this means. In 2017, in the 21st century, with satellite imagery and DNA sequencing and 100 years of formal zoology behind us, mainstream peer-reviewed science discovered a previously unknown species of great ape living on the island of Sumatra. They missed it. They missed an entire species of great ape with a multi-million-year evolutionary history. On the same island, in the same forest system, in the same general region we're talking about right now. The scientist who has worked on these orangutans the longest, Dr. Ian Singleton, director of the Sumatran Orangutan Conservation Program, put it this way: "It is fascinating that this population of orangutans differs so much from the orangutans in the north of Sumatra, and that even in the 21st century, a new species of great ape has been discovered. And it's not just 2017. In October 2025, months ago, a new cluster of Tapanuli orangutans was confirmed in a peat swamp 32 kilometers from their previously known range. Fecal DNA samples confirmed it. So we are still, today, in this year, finding new populations of great apes on the island of Sumatra. The forest is still hiding things right now while you watch this video. And I want to push on this a little more because most people, even people who follow this kind of story, don't fully internalize what 2017 did. The Tapanuli orangutan isn't a subspecies, it isn't a new color variant. It is a full species with its own evolutionary line going back longer than the line that produced us. It diverged from its cousins at roughly the same evolutionary depth as the split between humans and chimpanzees. And mainstream science, with the full machinery of 21st century biology behind it, did not know it existed until 8 years ago. The forest hid an entire branch of the great ape family tree from us. Then, in 2025, the forest hid an additional population of that same branch. You cannot tell me that the same forest cannot hide a small, shy, watchful ape.
This is the part of the story that is really important to me. The "we'd have found it by now" argument doesn't survive contact with the Tapanuli orangutan. We just found a new great ape in 2017. We found new populations of the great ape in 2025. The forest is still hiding things.
So here's where I'm going to ask you to do something. If you've gotten this far in the video, you probably care about how these stories are told, and you probably know how rare it is to get evidence, first cryptid coverage instead of clickbait. Subscribe if you haven't already, hit the notification bell. The next part of this video is where I tell you the strongest skeptical counterpunch, the one that almost talked me out of believing the story. I want you here for it. Because there is a fossil discovery on an island 2,300 kilometers from Sumatra that some scientists think changes the entire picture. In 2003, archaeologists working on Flores Island, Indonesia, uncovered fossils of a small hominin species they named Homo floresiensis. The press immediately nicknamed it the Hobbit, and not unfairly. The complete adult specimen stood approximately 3.5 feet tall. It walked upright. It used stone tools. It was anatomically distinct from Homo sapiens, its own species, sharing the Indonesian archipelago with modern humans into surprisingly recent prehistory. The current scientific consensus is that Homo floresiensis went extinct approximately 50,000 years ago. That's the careful answer. That's the answer you'd write on an anthropology exam. But here is what the Orang Pendek question forces you to consider. We now know, proven, documented, peer-reviewed, that small bipedal hominins shared the islands of Indonesia with modern humans into the geologically recent past. Not millions of years ago, tens of thousands, a blink in evolutionary time. Flores is approximately 2,300 kilometers from Sumatra. That is a real distance. But it is the same archipelago, the same general region, the same kind of dense tropical island forest. Some researchers, including primatologists I've been quoting throughout this video, have speculated that Orang Pendek could be a surviving population of Homo floresiensis, or a related small hominin species that escaped detection the same way Floresiensis itself escaped detection until 2003. I want to be careful here because this channel has a rule about not overpromising on speculative claims. This is a hypothesis. It is not a proven link. The standard scientific position is that Floresiensis is gone. But the discovery of Floresiensis itself proves something the story has to land. Bipedal small hominins shared this part of the world with us very, very recently. Whatever the survival probability is, it is not zero. And whatever Orang Pendek is, if it's anything, it has to be something. An unknown ape, a relict population, a new branch entirely. The witness descriptions are too consistent and too specific for nothing to be there. But the skeptics have a counterpunch. And it is a real one. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know I'm serious about the skeptical balance. Every script gets a real skeptical section, not a token paragraph. So let me give the strongest version of the case against Orang Pendek. Because the strongest version is honest, and the honest version is where the truth lives. In 2014, Oxford geneticist Brian Sykes published a paper in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B, one of the most respected biology journals in the world. The paper was titled Genetic Analysis of Hair Samples Attributed to Yeti, Bigfoot, and Other Anomalous Primates. Sykes conducted the first systematic genetic survey of cryptid hair samples ever attempted. 30 samples in total drawn from Yeti, Bigfoot, Almasty, and Orang Pendek reports worldwide. The Orang Pendek hair sample submitted to Sykes was traced via mitochondrial DNA to a Malaysian tapir. Not an unknown primate, not an unknown anything. A tapir. I am required to say that plainly because this channel's credibility depends on saying it plainly. The single piece of submitted Orang Pendek genetic evidence that went through rigorous peer-reviewed DNA analysis came back as a known regional mammal. That is a serious counterpoint, and I won't try to talk you out of it. I will, however, note two caveats on the Sykes study itself because they're factually true and the audience deserves them. First, the paper was corrected in 2015 because the institution Sykes listed as part of his affiliation did not exist. Second, his Himalayan polar bear finding from the same study was challenged by later geneticists Gutierrez and Pine, who showed the DNA fragment Sykes used wasn't precise enough to distinguish a brown bear from a polar bear. So the Sykes paper has cuts in multiple directions, but on Orang Pendek specifically, the verdict was tapir. We say it plainly, the skeptical case continues. There is, in Aceh province in northern Sumatra, a semi-mythical group of forest-dwelling small humans called the Mante tribe. A viral 2017 video shows dirt bikers in Aceh chasing what looks like a naked figure carrying a stick. The figure is small, fast, and disappears into tall grass. That video circulates as Orang Pendek footage. It almost certainly shows a human being. Possibly a Mante tribe member, possibly someone with developmental differences from a remote village. That kind of misidentification is real, and it muddies the water. There are other suspects too. Sun bears, which can stand bipedally for short periods and have a body shape that, at a distance, in undergrowth, with adrenaline running, could be mistaken for a small ape. Juvenile orangutans displaced from their normal range. Gibbons walking on the ground rather than swinging through trees, which they do occasionally. And the deepest skeptical point is the absence. 35 years of focused, well-funded, highly motivated searching by people who want to find this thing. Cameras, DNA collection, hair traps, plaster casts, no body, no clear photograph, no definitive sample. That absence has weight. Honest skepticism doesn't dismiss the witness reports, but it also doesn't pretend a 35-year absence of confirmation is nothing. And there is one more skeptical point worth raising because it's the version of the argument that almost talked me out of believing this story. Every long-running cryptid case eventually develops a community of believers who feed each other. Researchers reinforce each other's confidence. Witnesses primed by years of reading about Orang Pendek see ambiguous shapes in the undergrowth and resolve them, in their minds, into the creature they expected to see. Footprints get interpreted through the lens of what people want them to mean. The Cambridge primatologist himself was already sympathetic to the question before he ever looked at Davies's cast, which doesn't make him wrong, but it does mean we have to admit that no one whose name appears in this video came at it neutrally, including Martyr, who started neutral but stopped being neutral. The day she saw something near Mount Carinci that her own body wouldn't let her photograph. That is the strongest version of the case against. I take it seriously. I include it in this video because the channel's rule is that you take the strongest skeptical version seriously or you're not doing honest work. So why, after all that, do I still think this is the most credible cryptid in the world? 3 reasons. The first reason is biological plausibility. North American Sasquatch is described at 8 to 10 feet tall. An undiscovered great ape of that size in the contiguous United States is, biologically, a much bigger ask than an undiscovered small ape in a Southeast Asian rainforest. Orang Pendek's reported size, 3 to 5 feet, is consistent with everything we know about Sumatran zoology. The island has multiple primate species already documented, and the smaller a species is, the easier it is to hide. The second reason is geographic credibility. Orang Pendek lives in a place where mainstream science is still finding new mammals. The Tapanuli orangutan announcement in 2017, the Tapanuli peat swamp population confirmed in October 2025, Sumatran tigers documented in the Pariangan Forest Enclave in 2024, where they were considered functionally extinct. The Sumatran rhino, rediscovered in populations thought to be lost. This is not a continent we have mapped and accounted for. This is a place where the announced species count is still going up, decade after decade. The third reason is the credibility of the people who chased it. A Cambridge professor emeritus in primate biology, the former president of the Primate Society of Great Britain, an Idaho State professor of anatomy, whose foot morphology research was peer-reviewed and respected, a UK biologist with documented prior big cat DNA verification work, a British journalist who became head of the tiger conservation team at the largest protected area on the island. These are people with names, with reputations, with careers they were risking by attaching themselves to the question. Compare that to the names typically attached to most cryptid claims, and the difference is not subtle. Most Sasquatch evidence in North America runs through self-trained researchers, podcasters, and witnesses who go public years after the fact. That doesn't make any of those people wrong. I've covered some of their accounts seriously on this channel, and I will keep covering them. But it does mean the credentialed end of the credibility distribution is sparse. Orang Pendek is different. The credentialed end is where the strongest defense of the cryptid sits. The people with PhDs and academic appointments and peer-reviewed publications are, in this case, the ones who said, on the record, that there is something there. That inversion does not happen in any other cryptid story I have covered. That's why Orang Pendek is different. The current state of the question is open, genuinely open. There has been no new major expedition since Marshall's 2024 work. The realistic next chapter is not a dedicated Orang Pendek expedition. It's the steadily increasing density of trail cameras going up across Kerinci Seblat National Park for tiger anti-poaching purposes. Those cameras run for thousands of hours. They're designed to catch a stealth predator. If there is anything in those forests that doesn't want to be seen, the eventual probability of a tiger camera catching it goes up year over year. The most likely path to confirmation isn't an expedition specifically targeting Orang Pendek. It's a Sumatran tiger anti-poaching camera quietly capturing something nobody was looking for. But the people who built the bridge between Sumatran field research and credentialed Western science are gone. Jeff Meldrum died in September 2025. David Chivers died in March 2026. Whoever picks up this question next will be doing it without the two voices most willing to publicly take it seriously.
Here's where I personally land on this. Of every cryptid I've covered on this channel, Orang Pendek is the one I think most likely to be real. Not because the evidence is overwhelming, it certainly isn't, but because everything about it biologically are plausible. The people who chased it have actual names and actual credentials, and the island it lives on keeps producing new species of great ape, whether mainstream science is ready or not.
I don't know if Orang Pendek is an unknown great ape. I don't know if it's a relic small hominin. I don't know if it's a surviving Floresensis cousin hidden in a continent of jungle we have not finished mapping. I don't know if the next decade of tiger trail cameras will deliver the photograph that ends this story, or if the question stays open until I'm not making videos anymore. What I do know is that calling this folklore flat out, no engagement, no nuance, is intellectually lazy. A Cambridge primatologist disagreed with you if you want to call it folklore. He's gone now. So is the Idaho anthropologist who worked the casts with him. The two best scientific voices for this question are both silent now, and that is something worth marking.
If you've spent time in the Sumatra or anywhere else in Indonesia, and you've heard local accounts or seen something yourself, drop it in the comments. I read every single one of them.
If you saw the Global Cryptids video back in May, I promised this one was coming. This was the Orang Pendek follow-up. There are two more on that list I haven't gotten to yet. The Mapinguari in the Amazon and the Chuchuna in Siberia. Tell me in the comments which one you want next, because I'm leaning toward the Mapinguari, but I'll let the audience push me one way or the other. If you're new to this channel and you want to go deeper, 3 videos I'd point you to. The Jeff Meldrum tribute from late last year, which now reads differently, knowing we would lose David Chivers 6 months later. The full Global Cryptids overview, which set up this video and several others on the channel. And the Patterson-Gimlin modern analysis video, which is the closest thing this channel has produced to a peer-reviewed treatment of physical evidence. Every culture that has ever known a forest has reported a man in it. The Sumatran version has Cambridge primatologists, Idaho State anthropologists, plaster casts, and a 35-year field record. It is, by a serious margin, the cryptid case I'd put the most money on being real.
I'm Alex, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.